welcome to episode 42 of the Tailoring Talk Show with me, your host, Roberto Revilla. I'm a bespoke tailor, menswear designer, and owner of Roberto Revilla London Suit and Shirt Makers. This is the podcast where you drop in for the threads, but often leave with something quite unexpected. I talk to self-starters and creators about their journeys, the highs and lows, and lessons they've learned along the way. If you haven't already, please support the show by subscribing. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please help me out by leaving a rating and a review. Today, I'm joined by you. Yes, it's time for one of those rare solo episodes with just you and me. Not because I'm short of guests, because honestly, I have had so many requests lately, but it's been really busy on the work side of things. I have not been well recently, and I had to clear out my recording schedule the last couple of weeks because I wasn't sure if my voice would be back to full strength or not. So, season 4 has been the longest season to date. We've had, including this one, 14 episodes in total. So what I want to do to close the season out is look back and reflect on this past season and just run through some episode highlights. So hopefully you'll stick around and let's take a little look back at season 4. So we started off with what was episode 29 of Tailoring Talk back in January, and Artif, who I really miss, Artif Ghaffar of Zebra Home Cinema, joined me once again. I think that was probably his 5th episode of Tailoring Talk. We talked about our 2021 highlights, and Artif and we had made a New Year resolution to do more networking and get out there and meet more people. We were swapping stories of, how that was going for us. I have to say, since I've actually become reasonably good at it. I've met so many new people getting out there on the kind of business networking circuit, made some really, really great connections, made some fantastic new friends, found some amazing new clients as well. So I'm really, really glad that Artif and I made that pact. Artif, if you're listening, thank you so much. Artif is now busy, not just with Zebra Home Cinema. I think, they're really pushing to grow the business, and he has also started his own podcast. So well done him. Look up the Zebra Home Cinema podcast. It's definitely worth a listen. He's had some amazing guests on so far from the world of cinema. So definitely go check Artif out. If you've enjoyed him on Tailoring Talk, you'll love him on his own thing. We had the usual little bit of chat about 007, which has become such a big sort of theme for the podcast in recent months as we've been doing the Bondathon, and rewatching all the films from the very beginning, starting with Dr. No, which brings me neatly on to second episode of season 4, which was the beginning of the Bondathon, where Philip and I reviewed Dr. No. I had never seen Dr. No before, so it was just completely new to me. It was like totally fresh eyes on this film, and I really, really enjoyed it, like more than I thought I would. I'd always had this perception that Sean Connery was like a complete misogynist pig of a Bond. And so, I wasn't kind of really that bothered about watching any of his films, which sounds really bad now that I say it, because as a self-professed James Bond fan, from a purist point of view, I really should have seen all of the films from the beginning, but that was one reason for doing the Bondathon. It was basically to kind of force myself to do it and have some fun along the way as well. So yeah, I really, really did love this film. It was quite, sort of small and self-contained, and it was just a great sort of classic spy story. Really, really enjoyed it, and I loved the outfits in there as well. I thought the tailoring was fantastic, and I thought Connery as Bond was actually brilliant. I could see why a lot of people sort of hold fast to that idea that Connery is the best Bond. Definitely has given me sort of food for thought. But it was great, and it kick-started off this wonderful Bondathon, where I'll come on to it, but we're about to watch On Her Majesty's Secret Service this weekend. Then we go back to one more Connery, and then we get into the Roger Moore era, which I'm actually really looking forward to revisiting, because Moore was, I guess, my Bond when I was a very small child, but I don't really remember any of the films. I just remember some of the big action set pieces, but I don't remember much more than that. The Dalton years completely passed me by, and then it was only in the mid-90s when GoldenEye came out and I was in my late teens that I was then, going to the cinema, and GoldenEye was the first Bond film that I saw on the big screen, and Brosnan was really my Bond for all intents and purposes. So it's been great doing this, and I want to say a massive thank you to Phil and the Play Pause Turn guys for joining me on this endeavour. Episode 3 was with Tyler Foley, who is a former Hollywood stuntman and actor, and the episode was entitled "How to Present Yourself and Impact an Audience and Network Confidently" with Tyler Foley. Tyler is amazing. He's one of my favourite ever guests. Very, very popular episode. He's just so engaging. He brought so much energy to Tailoring Talk. I would really, really love to record again with him in future. And his episode was just one of those high value episodes where if you're someone who struggles with confidence, struggles with public speaking, struggles with networking and meeting people for the first time, approaching people, he just has so many tips. And this episode is gold for the very fact that it compels you to want to listen to it all over again with a notepad and pen and just take copious amounts of notes. I learned so much from spending time with Tyler and editing and listening back to this episode several times, and I know a lot of our listeners, a lot of you did as well, so I'm so grateful that Tyler was a guest and gave so much of his time to us. Artif then came back, and this was episode 4, and we were basically following up on what we learned about kind of embarking on this journey of networking and so on. So season 4 kind of started off as on a sort of networking kind of theme. A little bit further on from all the mishaps that we had with the first couple of networking events we went to, I think we were, sort of quite pleased to share some constructive tips and things that we'd learned that were great, and our newfound confidence and so on. Any time I get to spend with Artif is always great. So, I'm just always grateful when he's able to give up some time to join me. And we're probably long overdue another episode, so keep an eye out for him in season 5. Then we moved on to one of probably the most emotional episodes I've ever recorded, and that was with Heidi Aldridge. Heidi is a motivational speaker and trainer on with a particular focus on well-being, and she was also the host of the Lemonade Stand radio show. And this was a show that she hosted years ago where she spoke to people who basically shared their stories about taking adversity in life or life's lemons and making good out of the problems, the challenges that they face. So taking life's lemons and turning them into lemonade. And years later, she took those original recordings and she turned them into the Lemonade Stand podcast, which is a fantastic little podcast. The episodes are generally quite short, like barely 30 minutes. And she talks to so many different people across America, around the world. I've been fortunate enough now to have spent time with her on her podcast. So I've been a guest on her podcast. I think my episode is coming out at some point this summer, so I'll be sure to let you know. But we talked about definitions of happiness and success because those are different from everybody. For everybody, we talked about social media and the pitfalls of social media, and then we shared both of our struggles with the adversity that we faced growing up as children, and how we've used our experiences to try and make the world a better place in our own ways. And I got kind of quite heartfelt and deep for me, because I touched on some of the challenges that I had when I was growing up with abuse and sort of disciplinarian parents and so on. So yeah, it was really emotional. It was emotional recording it. It was very emotional editing it. I really struggled with the editing, because I kind of highlighted a whole section where I was talking about things that I'd gone through that I'd not really spoken to anyone apart from my wife before. And I didn't know whether I wanted to put it out there in the world. But in the end, my finger sort of left the delete button and I left it all in. So what you hear in that episode is pretty much everything that Heidi and I talked about. And yeah, it was very emotional. The reason why I left it in, I think, was firstly to show that I'm not superhuman. I am just a normal person who, has had challenges and has had to overcome them, and I have flaws, and I am still damaged by those experiences to this very day. But also, I just felt it was important to talk about it in case anyone out there is listening and is going through similar challenges in their own lives, and I just want them to hopefully hear my story and not give up and seek help and know that it's okay to get help. I remember one of my former guests, Jason Yap, who has since become a friend, and Jason, who is our dance entrepreneur, is the host of the Background Dancer podcast. And, there's one thing he said to me that was quite powerful, that, as a podcast host, producer, you get hung up on ratings and, how many people are listening to you and downloading. But he said at the end of the day, if you manage to help one person, well, like even now, I'm recording a solo episode, which is always really difficult because you're kind of talking to yourself. But even if if there's one person that's just listening to me right now, thank you, first of all. But, if one person hears you and one person gets something from what you've said or shared, then that's a good thing. So yeah, so that was TT43, Taking Life's Lemons to Make Lemonade with Heidi Aldridge. So if you haven't heard it, definitely recommend going back to listen to that one. But, maybe get some Kleenex and keep it handy. But, I mean, for all the sad stuff that Heidi and I shared, it is an episode that leaves you feeling hopeful. So yeah, one of the nicest episodes that I've recorded. Then we jump back into the Bondathon, and this time, so we were reviewing From Russia with Love, and this at the moment today is my favourite Bond film of the 5 that I've seen now. Philip joined me again. There was a bit of a kind of scheduling misunderstanding. So as you know, I'm on another podcast called Play Pause Turn, which is an entertainment pop culture podcast. And John and Alex, I can't remember exactly what happened, but I think I was due to record with them. But then I said I couldn't record with them because we were going to be recording the From Russia with Love episode for my own podcast. And they misunderstood, and they just jumped on the Skype call and joined us. So it was just fortuitous. It was beautiful. It was serendipity or whatever. I don't know what you call it, but it was just so good to have my Play Pause Turn buddies join me and Phil and talk about this wonderful movie. I absolutely loved From Russia with Love. It was just brilliant. Totally rewatchable. I remember just about everything about it. The outfits were fantastic. It was just a delight. So yeah, I just probably, definitely my favourite Bondathon episode so far. Yeah, From Russia with Love. My God, what a fantastic film. I can see why, some people put that up as the best Bond film ever. It's definitely no wonder. So then we headed back to the States. Episode 35 was with Mark Hirschberg. This had been a long time in the making. Mark and I had scheduling problems, mainly down to sort of technology, time zone issues, He's out in New York. He's East Side. Mark has had. I mean, God, what that guy hasn't done in his career is probably easier to talk about. But he's the author of the career toolkit. Essential things that nobody ever taught you at school. Prior to becoming an author and public speaker and business coach, he's tracked criminals and terrorists on the dark web, worked in academia as well, at MIT. I mean, the guy is just, he's super smart. Big Bond fan as well, so I will be inviting Mark on. I think he wants to join me for some of the Roger Moore episodes, so we'll definitely get him back. But such a great book, such a fantastic guest. Mark has got an enormous cufflink collection, like outnumbers me tenfold. The guy loves his cufflinks, and he loves tailoring as well. And on top of that, he's a dancer. He was one of the top-ranked ballroom dancers in the USA. So yeah, super talented guy, super fun episode. So Mark Hirschberg, fantastic guest, and absolute delight to know you, Mark, if you're listening. Back to London, to East London, and Cook Sahota joined me for the 36th episode of Tailoring Talk. Cooks is a multiple award-winning entrepreneur. He runs 3 businesses currently. I guess 4 if you count what he does with business coaching, but he runs Mr. Singh's, Two Bears and Cushy Face. And we really focused on Mr. Singh's, the family food business. So it started life as Mr. Singh's Sauces. Cooks' dad basically had his own special recipe sauce, and he used to bottle it up and go sell it in local shops and so on. And Cooks basically just put himself financially, put his neck on the line for the family business, and managed to grow it into a national institution. And if you have not tried Mr. Singh's crisps, I recommend that you get on to the Mr. Singh's website and you order yourself a mix box, so mrsingsonline.com, and just try them out. The chili and lemon are fantastic. The tandoori chicken are amazing. If you're a big fan of cheese and onion, you'll want to sample their twist on a British classic. But yeah, just made with love, all natural ingredients, just a fantastic story. And Cooks will be coming back to Tailoring Talk because he's got 2 other businesses that we need to talk about. We just didn't have time to go through everything. The guy is just so talented. Then we went back to the Bondathon and Alex joined us this time. So we were talking about Goldfinger. The formula starts to kind of come together. You can see the producers of these movies are now sort of starting to work out what their formula is. And it was great. Go back to that episode to see what we thought of that. Episode 38, we went over to Switzerland and I joined Nico Menino of Per Noir. Nico and his business partner Robin run a custom luxury fragrance brand. So they are, for all intents and purposes, high quality fragrance mixologists. This was a fantastic episode. I got to spend time with another creative entrepreneur and really sort of discover, the roots of what they do and how they got into the business and how they create their products and their inspiration and so on. Absolutely fantastic little brand. Definitely one for you budding entrepreneurs out there who are thinking about starting a business or might be already running a business, and you're interested in how other entrepreneurs have launched new products and taken new products and brands to market. Then we had Richard Gore, episode 39. Richard is a newer client of mine. We've known each other, God, I want to say maybe coming up to a year now, I think. Richard hails from Newport in Wales, and this was a lovely episode because I don't get much in-depth client feedback when they get my clothes. I get some, but it's very light touch. And this was a real opportunity for me to have a client on. I'd made a bit of an impact on his wardrobe, but Richard was able to sort of talk about where his interest in clothing came from, and how that started a journey that led him on a path that ultimately led to me becoming his tailor. And he really, really documents his first experiences of ordering his first bespoke suit, getting measured, how it made him feel, how the custom clothing that I've made for him have impacted his confidence and his attitude and his life in general. It was just wonderful to spend so much good quality time with someone, really sharing how they, the fact that what people like me do, I'm not just selling clothes. It's about everything that the clothes do for the individual. And if you're interested in tailoring, and you're interested in tailoring from the point of view of what it might do for you, or what it does for people who are addicted to tailoring, rely on tailoring, will only ever get their clothes made wherever possible, definitely Tailoring Talk episode 39 is one to grab a cup of coffee and just spend an hour with Richard. Just absolutely wonderful. Episode 40 was with Atish Parmar, another friend of mine who runs Metric Connect, a social media marketing agency in Leicestershire. Atish and I have got very similar stories, it turned out. It was just really nice to meet someone and become friends over an episode. That's what we did. He basically had founded and sold a business by the time he was in his early 20s, flunked university. Again, just tells a wonderful story of how being a university dropout didn't mean the end of the world for him, and he didn't let that stop him from becoming successful, or at least putting himself on the path to success. He now runs 2 businesses, I want to say, because he runs Cavendish in London, which is his property vehicle, and then obviously he runs Metric Connect, which is a social media marketing agency, and then he's also running, producing, and hosting the Social Connection podcast, which, by the way, is another great one to listen to. If you're interested in marketing your business, social media, and so on, then definitely subscribe to the Social Connection podcast with Atish Parmar. It is fantastic. He has some amazing guests, and it's, again, just so chock full of value for people who are trying to navigate the world of social media, and how they market their brand, and picking the right audiences, and all of that wonderful stuff. And then finally brings us up to the last episode of season 4 before this one, which was Tailoring Talk 41. And that was Phil, John, and Alex and I reviewing Thunderball, which was a lot of fun. Even if it wasn't, of the 4 films by this time that we'd seen, it wasn't my favourite. Again, I just had such a blast running through the making of this film and just talking through this movie scene by scene, and Phil's coming up with that really weird thinking that peeing on a bullet wound would cure it thing. It was just completely odd, but totally hilarious at the same time. I've known Phil for not over 30 years, coming up to 30 years, I want to say, because we've known each other since we were kids. And, while it wasn't surprising, it was something that he would totally come out with. It was just, I don't know, it was funny, it was endearing, there was a really good banter back and forth between the 4 of us as well. Lots and lots of fun. So there you go. That's it for season 4. I hope you don't mind me just sort of indulging you to close out the season. I just want to say thank you so much for your support, for being part of Tailoring Talk, and just for the love that some of you have shown when you leave reviews for me on Apple Podcasts, or you send me little messages, after a particular episode that you really enjoyed. It really means the world for me. I produce, edit, obviously host. I don't make any money out of Tailoring Talk. I pay all of the hosting costs out of my own pocket. And so when I get a little bit of feedback and a little bit of love, it really just gives me the energy to carry on and to do more. and it validates everything that I am doing, because sometimes you do wonder as a podcaster. I think a lot of podcasters will say this, especially when you're not a big successful show that has been able to monetize, which we're not at that stage yet. But when you get a little bit of love and a little bit of feedback, and people tell you that you're doing a good job or that you've helped them in some way, it really validates what you're doing. So thank you, and please keep that feedback coming, good and bad. The negative feedback is always constructive, but that helps me to be better. So season 5 is already underway in a recording sense. Phil and the Play Pause Turn podcast team did return a couple weeks ago. We recorded the You Only Live Twice review for the Bondathon, and they're going to be back, as I said earlier, they're going to be back with me next week, because we're going to be watching On Her Majesty's Secret Service this weekend. And Richard Gore, my dear friend and client, is coming back on Tailoring Talk for that episode as well, because that is his favourite Bond movie. I've got some exciting female founders and entrepreneurs coming up for you in season 5. I've already recorded with interior designer Natasha Gupta of Blue Feather Design Studio, Paramjit and Bruce from the Crazy Gin Company. I spent a wonderful afternoon with them in King's Cross outside, had a wonderful meal together, had a bit of a wander round, and we recorded that episode sort of live, in the sense that we recorded it outdoors. Can't wait for you to hear that. That's probably going to be a 2-parter. And I'm recording with Zamahar Desai, founder of Recommendation, next week. That'll be my first recording at someone else's home, so I'm very excited about that. And many more guests are being booked into the recording diary every week through the rest of the summer. So there is so much content coming out for you. We will be back in early July, and when we return, the plan is for you to have a new episode every Friday morning, fresh and ready for your listening pleasure each weekend. Or you can save them up for some Monday morning motivation. It's totally up to you. That's the beauty of podcasts. You can listen to them whenever and wherever the hell you want. If you'd like to support the show, you can now buy me a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com/Roberto Revilla. Any spare change you chip in and throw my way will go towards hosting and production costs. And thank you so much in advance for anything that, any spare change you can find down the back of the sofa that you can throw at me. Other ways to support Tailoring Talk are to leave me a rating and a review. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, definitely hit the subscribe button and hit the star button. It really, really helps people to find the show, because it helps with search algorithms and all that kind of black magic as well. You can find me on Instagram at Tailoring Talk Podcast and at Roberto Revilla London. And you can also email the show at tailoringtalkpodcast@gmail.com. I've talked about feedback. I love feedback. Please get in touch. I love hearing from you. That is it for this solo episode. I'm now off to record with the Play Pause Turn crew. We're talking about Obi-Wan, the Disney Plus series that just finished. So do check out Play Pause Turn. You can find them wherever you like to get your podcasts. Thank you so much yet again. I will see you on the next one. Season 5 is coming very soon, people. Hit that subscribe button. You do not want to miss it.